The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode 115.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Deep Space Nine episode, The Passenger. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Stiga. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. Folks, if you have not yet done so, please go to Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or YouTube, where you should subscribe, and on YouTube you should hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. So we're talking about this Deep Space Nine episode from the first season called The Passenger. And, well, let's get into it. I want to start by saying it is not the most remarkable of episodes. It's sort of just there. I mean, am I wrong?
Let's put it this way. I had to watch this episode twice to prepare for this because the first time I fell asleep halfway through.
Okay.
I didn't think it was that bad. I actually thought it was. I thought it was pretty good for a first season episode. I mean, it's not one that, like anything in the first season, it's not one I would go back and watch. Just when I want to relax or something for fun, but. There are much better episodes later on, but actually I thought this was pretty good.
No, it's not a bad episode. It's just kind of a meh. It's there. And
right.
It is kind of faint praise to say it's a good episode for first season of DS9. So, I mean.
And it's a lot better than first season episodes you're going to find in Next Gen or Voyager.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Well, I have certain complaints, but we'll get into those about it. But one thing to note is that Colm Meaney, I got to make sure I say it right. Colm Meaney is not in this episode, and he misses a few because I guess he was doing a movie at the time, and that's why we had Lieutenant Fremen show up, which we'll see him in a bit. But they wanted to add in this other character to have a little more B story, I guess, on this.
And Fremen was also someone they'd planned anyway. For structural reasons,
right?
And this was an occasion to use him. Also, Jake Sisko is not in this one.
That's right. No Jake, no Nog. And speaking of, I'll talk about Fremen in that security officer later because I get some interesting thoughts on that. So we start off the episode with Kira and Bashir in the runabout, and they're coming back from some mission, and Kira tells Bashir, how impressed she was by his medical skills. She's being nice
And there's one interesting thing in this scene where he says, yes, well, tricorders are accurate on living people, but not so accurate on dead people. First thing they taught us in medical school. So
right.
So that's a neat little idea about tricorders, and how they work.
Right.
Unfortunately, they then totally throw the rest of this scene.
Yes.
And it's terrible.
Got to have the braggart Bashir, he can't even accept a compliment without making himself like the center of attention.
This is one of the I think one of the worst initial character developments I've seen in Trek. I mean, there've been some other bad ones, but just the way this first half of the first season Bashir in DS9 is just kind of a jerk. I just can't stand him.
He's an incredible jerk here. This is the worst I think we've seen of Bashir.
Yeah.
It may be the worst ever because Kira is, giving him a compliment or at least expressing amazement at like, wow, that you saved that guy. That was amazing. And he's like, yes, I know. He's like within an inch of saying it's such a privilege for you to be able to work with me.
Right.
I think he pretty much says that without actually saying it.
Yeah. and he's just bragging on himself. And this is, what were the writers thinking?
Right.
I mean, I know they want everyone on Deep Space Nine to have flaws and rough edges, and that's one of the things that makes the show interesting. But this is just excessive. My guess is that maybe they thought this was funny.
I think they tried to make him just the most cocky person you've ever met, that the world revolves around them. And I'm glad they realized very quickly that they need to make this a much more likable character.
How quickly was it, though? I mean, I don't think it really turned around for him until he started doing the James Bond holodeck adventures.
I wonder if this was supposed to be a counterpoint to the end of the episode where he admits he's humiliated. Like he's taken down a peg or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the connection between those things, though.
But it's his story. I mean, it's his character, though. I mean, from the first episode, the first time we meet him, he's walking into the sickbay talking about how thrilled he is to be doing frontier medicine to Major Kira, who grew up on the frontier, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah, he's always sticking his foot in his mouth with Kira, that's for sure.
It's particularly bad here, though.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do like that Kira's about to tell him off when she gets interrupted by a priority 1 distress signal. Has anyone ever told you that? Yeah. So they get a distress signal from a Kobliad transport that losing life support and whatever. And so they go over, they beam over to the ship. It's on fire. Bashir is assisting an unconscious woman on the floor, and she's trying to tell him, don't open the door to where the prisoner is, but he ignores her. He opens the door. She claims that the prisoner started the fire, and he starts treating this guy.
To help him escape, the prisoner started the fire.
Yep.
Yes, she said the prisoner's trying to escape, and that's why the fire's there. So Bashir starts treating him. He's unconscious on the floor, but he wakes up for a second, grabs Bashir by the throat, and says, "Make me live," and then he dies.
So of course he's not dead.
Right.
I mean, this episode is not going to be about Bashir struggling about losing a patient. So,
no.
Of course he's not dead. And after grabbing Bashir's throat, that should tell you who the prime suspect is as the vector for how he's going to live.
But we have to have some misdirection first because...
Well, but that's the thing is it's just right from the beginning, like they've told you basically how this is going to play out. And then later on, they try to walk it back with, obvious misdirection. It just doesn't work. But I do like, Father Cory, you kind of made that reference. He's only mostly dead.
Yeah.
What do you have to live for? A nice Princess Bride reference.
Or to use a Monty Python one, I got better.
Yeah.
Good. I think I'll go for a walk. So they get the fire under control. They tow the ship into DS9. The woman's in the infirmary. She wakes up and she's very concerned.
Yeah, I want to comment here because now that we get a good look at her, even though she's got the alien forehead and stuff all over her, it's Julie Caitlin Brown. Yay! Mm-hmm.
Wait,
Julie Caitlin Brown is a Hollywood sci-fi actress who shows up in small parts in a lot of things. She's most famous for having played Natoth on Babylon 5 and Jakar's assistant. And she is a very strong, kind of forceful character. I mean, that's just her as an actress. And she's certainly pulling that off here. She clearly has had a lot of pepper with her scrambled eggs this morning. And it's just a pleasure to see Julie Caitlin Brown in a part. The part she's playing is a woman named Tai Kajada, and she's from Kobliad Security. And she is obsessed with the prisoner whose name is Vantika, and she has been apparently hunting him for 20 years, and he's sort of Dracula. She tells us he's a scientist who's done all kinds of evil things to extend his own life.
It kind of reminds me of Les Miserables, Javert, who tracked down the hero of that for 20 years to track him. So you're supposed to get this idea of the obsessed law officer, and she comes across that way right off the bat because she's like, make sure he's dead. You have to do an autopsy. I have to see the body.
I'm going to stab the body in the process,
Yes.
I was just waiting for her to stab the body. Even though she didn't have a knife, it's like she's going to grab something and stab him. What's a little surprising to me after have you done a retinal scan? Is that she didn't stab him in the eye, just the chest.
Yeah.
Right. Then she starts, she gets all demandy, too. Like, I want you to scan my ship. Make sure there's, hey, lady, you're a guest here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't give me orders. But, so we got a very clear picture of her character right off the bat. Then we have Odo in Quark's bar bantering over... First, they're bantering over Quark's hankering for Dax, and they discuss Odo's desire to be left alone and Quark's desire to have things he can't have. So, these essential character moments. And then that gives Odo's opening to say, you mean things you can't have, like that Duridium shipment that's coming in? And that's where we see Starfleet Security Lieutenant Primin, who introduces himself to Odo and says, do you always discuss secret Duridium shipments with the underworld characters?
Local black market.
Yeah.
As they're walking down the promenade, this highly public area, he's talking about it himself.
Right. And Odo says, well, it's none of your business, so go away. And then that's when Primin says, it took me 3 weeks to get here for this operation, so I just want to make sure it goes off well, and that sort of thing. So they get off on the wrong foot. So then we move to Bashir briefing the senior staff on the whole Vantika-Kajata situation, and he tells them that the autopsy did match up the DNA with the files, about Vantika from the Kobliad.
And he's not a clone because they tested for that, and
we've done that already.
Because we've done that.
Yeah.
Yes. We keep doing, that's a whole other thing. We didn't actually mention that. This is, in some ways, a lot like that other episode where we had the Bajoran who was a cloned his own body, and how is he still alive if he's dead, sort of thing. I mean, it's, he's come here to do something dastardly. This is we're going over the same ground a little bit here, aren't we? I mean, is it sort of the same thing?
In a light way, but they're making it, an identity mystery is a fairly standard plot, and This is another one of those, but, the basic rule on Star Trek is you can do similar things as long as you do them a different way.
Right.
And they're doing it a different way. This isn't going to be a clone.
Okay. So they do speculate that Vantika's he was coming to DS9 when he was captured, and so they speculate that he was on his way there to steal the Duridium shipment coming from the Alpha Quadrant because the Kobliad are a dying species. They need it, which is apparently a rare thing, mineral or something that their species needs, and it's rare enough that there's a black market for it, etc.
So now you got the caper mystery that gonna jump into the middle of this as well.
It's like those Conehead sketches from Saturday Night Live from the 1970s.
Mr. and Mrs. Conehead, I'm just trying to sort out your tax situation before 68. Now, about these deductions for last year, you claimed $2,000 for stocking caps, $7,000 for beer, and $2,000 for titanium. What is titanium, anyway?
The most durable metal known to mankind. We need it to survive.
Okay, fine.
Now I'm having flashbacks to Saturday morning cereal commercials. It's like, now fortified with 9 essential vitamins and minerals, including Duridium.
Yes. Everyone needs a recommended daily allowance of Duridium. So this is when Primin arrives in Ops, and Sisko wants to brief Primin on the Vantika situation. Basically, Kira's like, I'll send for Odo, and Primin says, no, we don't need to bother him. I'll let him know what he needs to know. So we're getting this sense that Primin has this superiority idea over Odo. Odo's just the frontier cop.
He's out here to practice frontier justice now.
Yep.
Exactly. Sisko pretty quickly shuts down Primin's superiority, puts him in his place, and reminds him that Starfleet are the guest of the Bajorans on this station, and they are to act like guests. And I do like that moment where Sisko... It's a real leadership moment where he doesn't yell at Primin, but he makes it clear to him, this is how things work here, and you're new, and you have to understand that things don't work the way you expect them to according to the manual back on, starships.
Well, he does bring out the command voice, though. He's saying,
Yes.
basically, Odo's in charge. Clear.
Right.
But he also makes it apparent to Primin that he can learn from Odo.
Yes.
That he really respects Odo's abilities, which are better in this environment than what Primin is trained for. And so, and this is going to be good because what Primin does next is he goes to Odo and apologizes. And it's like the first thing he does. And Cisco did not tell him to apologize. This is not an unwilling, grudging apology. He realizes he's screwed up. He goes and he apologizes, says, "I'm sorry we got off on the wrong foot, and and I hope we can be friends and work together," and stuff like that. And this is good because up to now, Primin has been written as if he's an unsympathetic character.
Right.
Yes.
Because our sympathies are automatically going to be with Odo because he's the regular.
Yep.
And so now Primin is actually showing himself to be a decent human being. And that makes him much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just a cardboard, one-dimensional character. And this was a good move on the part of the writers to have Primin just be sincere and apologize and be a good guy from this moment.
Yeah. Right. Better than
Bashir. That I was having that mental comparison. Yeah.
It is nice to see when they avoid the stereotypes, because they could have written out it completely as just the stereotypical jackbooted Federation security jerk
thug. Yeah,
but he's not.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to make that comparison earlier. We get some of these Starfleet security guys showing up again later on in a subsequent season. What is his name? The
Eddington.
Eddington. Right. Get that. And he does a little bit of the same thing where Eddington shows up. He's Starfleet security. There's some friction between him and Odo. It gets resolved, and Eddington becomes a guy we kind of like, which is then they turn the tables on us at some point, which is I think it was great. I love that whole development. But
and then we start getting Les Mis references.
Exactly.
right. That's where we really get them. So Primin is sort of a precursor to Eddington later. So Primin and Odo get down to work, and they discover that all of Odo's security files are missing. And Kajada comes in and says, "Vantika did the same thing before. He's alive!" And they're like, "Okay, calm down, obsessed lady.
We just have to reboot. It said the database servers are unavailable. We just have to reboot the MySQL SS service, and we'll be fine."
Yes.
Oh, wait. No.
Yeah, the database is gone, so we'll have to reload from the backup, right?
Yeah.
This is another one of those things where people who don't know how computers work should not write computer stuff, because they make this claim that, it was easier to just purge the entire active memory of the computer system instead of going after just the one lockdown file. And I'm like, if that's how your computer system works, there's no point in having security on your files.
Yeah.
Because, it's so backwards and upside down. Your whole security system is messed.
You know what they call active memory in a computer? The RAM. You know what happens when you turn off your computer? The RAM gets purged. It's not a big deal. That's why you have things called hard drives.
Right. It just,
I'm sorry. This is, of course, I was a computer guy before I was a priest. So, I mean, this is where I'm sitting there going, okay, y'all, you're getting into too much of the technobabble that you don't know about. Just leave it alone.
Right. So computers work a lot differently 3 centuries from now. Let's just say that. And we'll go on to the next thing. So Cisco, to his credit, says, all right, we have to operate on the assumption that Vantika is alive. As improbable as it is, and he may have an accomplice who's carrying out his plan or something, but we just need to operate on the assumption that he's alive until we have confirmation otherwise. So that's when Odo comes in and pulls Cisco aside and to talk to him and threatens to resign over the Primin situation. And I like these character moments because Odo is mad. He's really mad. And he's leaning into Cisco. And Cisco just kind of smiles at Odo and says, this is why I like you, Odo. I know where you stand.
Yeah.
And Odo does the same thing and tries to resign when Eddington gets here. So there's going to be an echo of this. But Cisco tells Odo, be reasonable. You didn't expect the Federation to assume control of an installation like this and not have somebody from Federation security to look out for its interests.
Yeah.
Right.
And Odo says, yeah, that's reasonable. And that's also structurally why Primin exists. Because the writers realized the Federation would have a security officer like Primin to look after its interests. And so they'd been waiting to introduce him for a while. Odo then is like, as Sisko kind of walks him off the ledge, he acknowledges more points of, okay, that's reasonable. And it comes down to who's in charge. And Sisko says, in a joint operation like this, you are. And so, and that's enough for him. And he says, okay, I unresign.
Right. I can live with that, he says. Then we have Sisko goes to Dax's lab, and she tells him that she's discovered that someone tried to break into Kajada's ship, and they were potentially looking for this data chip that Dax found in Vantika's things that contains a map of the humanoid brain, quote unquote.
Yeah, like there's one brain.
There's one humanoid brain.
By the way, I like the fact that SD cards survive to the 24th century.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Obviously, they say humanoid brain and not human brain because we need to leave it wide open so that Vantika can be in humans, non-humans.
Anybody with a rubber forehead.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, all the brains are the same. You could just pull them out of one head and put them in the other, right?
Right.
And this makes very little sense from an evolutionary standpoint because humanoids, even if you had humanoid body forms develop on multiple different planets, their brains would be very different.
Right.
But this is Star Trek, where we had that progenitor species that seeded humanoid life throughout the galaxy.
Yep.
Yes.
And we can headcanon them as a reason. And also, here on Star Trek, I mean, humans and Vulcans and Klingons are all the same species because they can interbreed with each other.
Yeah. This is true. So, yeah, we're just moving on from the humanoid brain. So we're After Hours at Quarks, which actually would be a really good web series. After Hours at Quarks. Anyway, he's looking for during the cleaning, he's rooting around on the floor looking for anything valuables that people may have dropped.
That's what they consider cleaning, is getting all the money that was left behind.
Right. There are no pennies left on the floor in a Ferengi household. Anyway, he's alone. He dismisses his cleaning crew as incompetent, and so he's alone. And someone grabs Quark from behind and speaks in a low voice that sounds an awful like Julian Bashir's, but claims to be Vantika. I have to say, Siddiq El-Fadil does this. He tries to put on this other voice, so it's not immediately apparent it's him, but it's just not good. It's just not a good
His acting in this, at least when in the other persona, doesn't quite work.
Well, so we may as well address that now since you brought up the voice. He tried more to disguise his voice than what we hear, because in post-production, they looped all of his lines. They made him re-record them. And he apparently used a voice that was described as being too Bela Lugosi. So he apparently put on a foreign accent, like a Hungarian accent or something. And they thought, when they saw the dailies, they thought, this isn't really working for us, so let's make him do it all again. And so what we're hearing is him in a studio trying to lip sync himself with an odd, affected delivery,
Yes.
Because he can't completely change. He's got to match that. Now, in other later scenes, we'll see his face.
Yeah.
We don't hear, but later we will. And he's going to have to match what his lips are doing when he's trying to do this Hungarian thing, only now he's not going to be doing the Hungarian thing. And so that's going to add to the stiltedness of his delivery. Because when you're doing a foreign accent, you're shifting your in particular, you're lengthening and contracting your vowels. And that is going to make it harder to do something that sounds natural. And so what we end up is this performance by him where it's like, well, Captain Sisko, I think you should do what I'm telling you to do, or I will go to warp and tear this ship apart. And it's very, very stilted. It's very bad delivery. It is not good acting. It's also not his first attempt, though, because and I would have been interested to see, okay, let's see it with the Hungarian Bela Lugosi accent. What would that have been like?
We want to suck your blood. So, anyway, he says to Quark that, hey, are you ready? Quark is obviously his co-conspirator in this heist. And so are you ready to help me steal the Deridium shipment? And Quark's, I thought you were dead. And no, I'm not dead. I'm only mostly dead. And so Quark is hiring some mercenaries.
I would meet you here at this hour.
Yeah.
I like how he has it planned to the hour when he's going to show up.
Yep. Yes. You showed up on time. And
he wanted Quark to hire some mercenaries for the upcoming operation.
That's right. So now we go to the infirmary. Bashir has called Kajada over to go over the DNA scan results that he'd sent into Starfleet and to confirm, and they banter in a bit of misdirection about how Bashir was unable to contact her the previous night. She said she had trouble sleeping and she was using an alpha wave inducer. And he says, "Be careful; those this can be dangerous if you overuse them. So they must be addictive." Anyway, so we have this whole misdirection of, was that really her in Quark's last night using Bashir's fake voice? No. So Dax calls Bashir to her laboratory. They discuss Vantika's research into transferring brain consciousness, moving from one brain to another. Bashir says only Vulcans so far have been able to do synaptic pattern displacement, i.e. the Katra thing, which we saw with McCoy and Spock, and suggests that Vantika's consciousness is hiding in Kajada's brain. Oh.
Yeah, and as a secondary personality that she wouldn't even be aware of.
It's kind of like dual booting your computer,
Yes.
Yeah. It also is very reminiscent of what happens on Babylon 5, because it turns out on Babylon 5, and a sinister government agency, initially known as Bureau 13, later known as the Night Watch, has planted an agent called Control, who does not know that Control is an agent. There's a secondary personality, and eventually, and to activate the personality, it can come out on its own at night when the main host is asleep, or you can beam a password telepathically into the head that will force the personality into activation. And so eventually they have to, one by one, feed the password into the head of every senior officer on Babylon 5 before they find out it's Talia Winters, the telepath.
It's very clever. Yes.
Yeah. So we get to see that concept played out at more length on Babylon 5.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that would be more interesting.
Yeah. Now, here with Kajada, so the reason that Bashir suspects Kajada is because she's a fellow Kobliad. And if you're going to transfer your brain to, someone else, your mental patterns to someone else, you'd have the best fit with a member of your own species, like when Spock transfers his into McCoy, because as we've established, humans and Vulcans are the same species.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable suspicion. That a Kobliad would try to put his brain in another Kobliad. But we've already heard the voice, and it's clearly masculine, so this doesn't work. They would have done better to have him using a vocoder, so you couldn't tell if it's a male or a female voice when he talked to Quark.
Right. I mean, it's clearly Bashir's voice, too.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. And they, what's poetic justice if he was to hide in the mind of his own worst enemy, which it would be, actually. Anyway, they decide not to tell Kajada at this point until they can figure something out, and they exclude her from the further security planning. And Odo, says when she complains, send her to me and I'll tell her. And so she shows up and she's mad at being locked out of things, and you're fools for not including me. So Quark, meanwhile, meets with the mercenaries in his bar, including some pirate-like Bajorans. I like the guy. Like one guy has like a headscarf that looks like he's a pirate. They're very clearly mercenaries. and they're meeting in his bar again after hours, and Kajada is sneaking in on the upper level of the balcony to spy on him when she falls from the balcony for some reason. We don't see what causes it, but later on in the infirmary, she'll wake up for a moment and say, I was pushed. I was pushed.
And she's lying to try to get them interested in Kajada again, in Vantika again, even though they already are operating on the assumption Vantika is alive.
Right. Quark claims that she was alone he was alone when she fell up. There was no one else in the bar. I don't know what's going on, why she was there. Bashir tells Sisko that he can't tell if Vantika is in her brain until he knows the transfer method. I'm not sure why, but again, this is all fake science anyway, so let's go with it. In the rest of Star Trek, they always can see dual brain patterns. Like anytime there's a secondary brain pattern in someone, but for here we have to have it where he can't. So
later on, they can tell that the second pattern is gone.
Right. Well, then they know the transfer method.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. Dax tests the theory that Vantika used something under his fingernails to transfer his bio-coded message of his consciousness into his victim.
She's apparently checked everything else and is left with the fingernails when Sisko comes in. And yeah, there's a little microscopic power generator under one of his fingernails. And I like the fact that they're using nanotech.
Yes.
That's good because they would have that in the future. So even if this is nonsense, at least, they're putting it in a plausible technological format that they would have in the future. And so he used this microscopic generator to send electrical impulses that fed his mental patterns into the glial cells of somebody else. And now they know the entry method. It's through the glial cells, which are real cells that people have. But what strikes me is like, wow, that thing must have lots of bandwidth. if it can transmit an entire human consciousness in a second or two through somebody's glial cells through the thing under your fingernail, I mean, that's impressive.
That is an impressive bit of technology, yes. And at this point, they're still assuming that Kajada is Vantika. The moment of the Duridium shipment arrival has come, where everyone's at high alert. They're doing their all their last final checks. Odo's with Kira, and he realizes Primin isn't there. Why isn't he here? He hasn't. I sent him to you, and he hasn't done what he've asked. He's off on his own. Oh, that Starfleet security guy. He said he would obey me, but now he's obviously disobeying me again. We're supposed to get that idea.
So maybe he's the personality.
Yes,
is part of the misdirection. By the way, in fairness to them, in suspecting Kajada, now we saw at the beginning of the episode, Vantika grab Bashir by the throat.
Right.
So to us, he's the obvious candidate. And he's the one it should not be. I'll tell you at the end of the show who it should be. Okay. But it's not implausible that it could have been Kajada, because he could have done anything to Kajada before we caught up with them.
Yep.
And we wouldn't have seen it. So he could have grabbed her by the throat earlier. So it's not unreasonable. It's just they've already ruled her out because we heard a male voice.
Right. Within the logic of the story, she makes sense. But within what they've revealed to the audience, and that's one of my one of my small complaints is they've revealed more to the audience than they have to the characters, and so we're stuck in this position of knowing who it is before they do, and it's kind of awkward at that point.
And they don't. They're trying to keep the audience from realizing it and not succeeding.
Right.
Yes.
What you want to do, there are situations where you can, as a writing choice, you can let the audience know more than the characters. But when you do that, you want to play it for suspense.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh no, they don't realize this, and now they're heading towards some disaster, and I know it's coming and they don't.
Right.
That's how you want to play it when the audience knows more than the characters.
Yeah, exactly. So we have Quark leading the mercenaries to a runabout that they're going to use to take over the freighter carrying the Duridium. He says Vantika somehow managed to procure one, and when they get there, they see Bashir. We have this awkward moment where Quark is like, oh, Dr. Bashir, sorry, we're in the wrong place. And it's finally revealed that he's Vantika. Dun, dun, dun. Then we have this whole thing where Bashir takes them on the runabout, and they take off, and Dax is trying to find Bashir.
Yeah, she uses her iPhone's Find My Friends to try to locate him.
Again, this is another one of my Star Trek complaints, which is a general thing. why is it always they track the comm badge instead of the person? You'd think that they could, like, with all these amazing sensors they have, they can only track the comm badge. So all you have to do is take someone's comm badge off, and they're unknown. Can't find them. Just drives me crazy a little bit. Anyway, it turns out that Primin was actually following Odo's lead and his hunch. Vantiga planned to do the same thing that he did before, using a secondary system to take out the entire station's security grid instead of just going after the one thing that they need. And so he used the waste reclamation system to shut down the defense grid, which, again, seems like really poor security. That
really serious toilet backup too.
Yeah.
your waste system shuts down your defense grid. Oh, I hate it when that happens. The plumbing charges are incredible.
Yeah, it just seems bad security. Bad.
Yeah, this is going back to, okay, a computer system should be able to tell if you add something like that, especially these super advanced Federations computer systems should be say, hey, you've got this device that's not supposed to be touching that.
Right.
There's something wrong here. You might want to go check that out.
Go check that. My website does that anyway. Yeah. In ops,
what they should do is like hire the same hackers that the Mr. Robot writing team did to keep it real.
Oh,
it's like how would you really take down a 24th century computer system?
See, now that would be an interesting story. Someone should write a really good Star Trek story on that. So in ops, they see the runabout deploying, and Bashir is gone, and he signed out the runabout. So therefore, we're starting to think that Bashir is somehow involved. The mercenaries take this Federation ship, this freighter, and as I write here, a very wooden Bashir beams aboard and is astonished that the station is able to lock a tractor beam on them and hail them.
Because he expected the toilets to back up and take down their defense grid. Yeah.
Yes. Typically arrogant. I don't know if that's Bashir's arrogance or Vantiga's arrogance. Maybe both.
What I have in my notes is the problem is that we have no reason to care about Julian at this point, because they established him for us as super jerk number 1 at the top of this episode. And now he's under the control of this evil entity. And what you want is for the audience to care about that fact.
Yep.
And like one of the best episodes in this regard is later on in Deep Space Nine, where Keiko O'Brien is taken over by a Pa Wraith. And I keep going back to that episode because it's one of certainly my favorite examples of a possessed person storyline, because she does not become a zombie.
No,
like right. which Julian basically does here, given his wooden performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But Keiko does not. It's like she retains a personality, and she's like eating chocolates as while she's possessed by the Pa Wraith, and she's like, Miles, you're not seriously going to let me eat this whole bag, are you?
Yeah. Right.
And she comes across as a very human person, despite
creepy,
the fact
human.
she's under. But I care about Keiko O'Brien a lot, and even she is often unsympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
But I care about her more than I care about a number 1 super jerk in this episode. So they're by setting him up unsympathetically at the top of the episode, and we don't really know him that well because we're in the first season. Mm-hmm. I have all the less reason to care what happens to Julian at this point.
Well, and it's interesting. I almost feel like the writers realized that as they were writing this story, because then, right after we see him, I'm going to destroy the ship. All of a sudden, now, if you don't release me, I'm going to go to warp and we're going to destroy the ship. All of a sudden, this magical element that they need, if it gets scattered through the system, would destroy life on all planets within the system.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now we've got something that you actually do care about.
All those off-screen people we've never met.
I know. You care about them more than you do Bashir, basically.
Yeah, that's some pretty... Deridium must be some pretty potent stuff to completely irradiate an entire star system from one exploding freighter. But that's another thing. Also, this threat, if you don't release the ship, we'll take it to warp and we'll kill Bashir. And it's like, you'll be dead too, and we've already established that you're going to do anything to survive, so I don't believe you. Like, your threat is not really credible.
That's where I wanted to hear Cisco say, okay, Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll get a new doctor.
In thinking about this, I don't think they played it wrong, because we have two really compelling interests here. Bashir doesn't need, or Vantika doesn't need, I mean, we do know he has this overriding will to live.
Mm-hmm.
But Sisko is squeaky clean Mr. Dudley Do-Right with sharp corners. And he is going to be very determined not to let the Duridium poison the solar system and have everyone evacuated off Bajor.
Right.
So they both have very compelling motives. And it doesn't really, all that really matters is Sisko isn't willing to risk it.
Right.
That he might. Now, what I was wondering is, why would the space pirate sitting at the console be willing to implement this order? It's like, you may have a death wish, but I'm a mercenary. I'm only interested in getting paid. I'm not a martyr for whatever. Right. So I'm going to refuse this order. And to give props to the writers, the space pirate gets up and refuses to implement the order, at which point Vantika shoots him and takes over the console himself. So they took care of that problem.
Yes. Appropriately named Durg. That's the sound he makes when he gets shot. Durg! So, yes. So Dax comes up with this plan that we can suppress Vantika's consciousness using, some pulse sent through the tractor beam and through the ship and whatever, the shields and some thing. So, but she needs time to implement it because, it takes 30 seconds to implement such a complex plan. So,
it takes a minute 30, and they only had a minute. So
yes, exactly. And so Sisko has to vamp.
So she has to write a really quick macro to do this.
Right. And the macro goes off on the first try, which never happens for me. So kudos to her. So this pulse that goes through makes a confused Bashir emerge, his consciousness, and he's able to drop the shields just as Vantika's consciousness starts to come back. Although we don't see the actual moment, they're trying to leave us a little bit of
His hand does really great acting at this point to communicate that the brain cloud is coming back.
Right. So they do manage to beam him out, and Sisko stuns him despite Bashir saying, "No, I'm okay. Bzz, I'm not taking any chances."
Yeah.
Then in sickbay, Dax manages to beam out any glial cells that have Vantika's neural patterns into a little containment device. So we've isolated them, and Bashir is back to his normal self, hopefully more humiliated, more humble than before.
And he says he is.
Yes, he says he's been humiliated, so good for him. And then in the end, they're going to, Kajada comes in, and it's like, all right, what are you going to, so that's what's left. What are you going to do with it? And she says, I assume you've released the prisoner to me? Yes, I have. And so she takes out her pistol and shoots the thing and says, well, that's the end of what was left of Vantika. Actually, I do like that ending.
Yeah, I like the ending too. It also struck me, okay, so what are the theological implications of shooting the little container? Is that capital punishment? And I think the answer is no, because this was a bunch of glial cells at this point that stored memory patterns. That's not a functioning, real living human being. And Vantika, regardless of his self-perception, really did die, and it was just his memories that were controlling Bashir. I mean, he was basically Swamp Thing at this point. He thought he was Alec Holland, but really he's a plant. And in the same way, Vantika may think, I'm here controlling this human, but it's really Julian with false memories.
Right. Like sort of almost like a split personality that's been imposed on him, but it's still him.
Yeah.
So
now, in terms of who it should have been.
Yes.
Kira, we had 3 people on the runabout. So the 3 people that Vantika, you want to look for the transfer. Unless you're going to let him go completely rogue and take over anybody.
Yeah.
It needs to be someone who was there when he died. Mm-hmm. Vantika is a plausible suspect because she's the same species and spent a lot of time with him alone.
Kajada, yes.
Kajada spent a lot of time with Vantika alone and is the same species. Bashir is obvious because he grabbed him by the throat and said, "Make me live."
Yep.
And that means Kira's the least obvious of the candidates because he didn't have any physical contact with her. So that makes her the best of those candidates to actually be the host. So what I would have done is pointed to the factors I just mentioned to throw suspicion on the plausible candidates of Kajada and Bashir. And then in the end, it's going to be revealed, no, it was actually Kira, because the thing under his fingernail wasn't the only microprobe in the room, you idiots. There was a whole network of them. And I went after the person who was farthest from me to throw suspicion off.
Right, exactly. That's actually good. Grabbing Bashir was just the activation for the probes that were across the room, not the probe itself, that sort of thing. Totally could do that. That actually would have been better. That would have been good, because... And then you just could have said she disguised her voice as Bashir's in the quarks to throw it off.
Well, no, I would have vocoded all of that.
Well, yeah, you could do that too.
It would have been vocoders. I mean, he's already wearing a cloak.
Right.
And grabbing Quark from behind so we can't see him. So if we're going that far to disguise his identity, we may as well use a vocoder as well to shift the register of his voice.
Right. Because again, Quark's got really good ears. You'd think he could have told it was Bashir's voice. But no, that would have been better. That would have been better. Any final notes or thoughts on this episode, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
Jimmy?
Nope.
All right. Before we wrap up, we do have some listener feedback. We got an email from Amber G, who says, I recently discovered your podcast and have listened to most of the episodes. I've just finished Picard and listened to those episodes. One thing I was annoyed with in Picard was the use of the name Narak. I've always wanted to name a son Narak after the saint and darker of the church, Gregory of Narak. Narak is the most common name in Armenia, and I was sad to see the use of this unique, for the West, saint's name used on a villain. I just thought you might be interested in that observation, since your podcast is uniquely a Catholic take on Star Trek.
I agree. I don't recall. I know I meant to mention that St. Gregory of Narak is a doctor of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And an interesting character for a variety of reasons. So I like the name Narak too, and it didn't seem appropriate for this guy who, as you can tell by the way I referred to him consistently, he always struck me not as a Narak, but as a Derek. So he's
no
for me, he's always
Dereks.
He's Derek the Romulan.
Yes, there have been in many different places bad guy names that were good until someone gave it to the bad guy. Like there is not a child born in 2020, a girl child born in 2020 who will be named Karen, for example, which is actually an anagram of Narak.
And maybe that's where it came from.
Maybe, who knows?
Narak's a lot better than the 2020 Karen movement.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, but thank you, Amber, for listening and for sending in your email.
And welcome.
Yeah, welcome to the show. All right. So as we wrap things up, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of Star Trek.
I just, by the way, just to mention, I know you're going to mention the next episode in a moment that we're going to do, Dom, which will be from Star Trek Enterprise. But when we cycle through to Deep Space Nine again, you know what's coming up next?
Ouch.
Oh, I know.
Come on, just say the rhyme.
We're trying to get listeners.
We're gonna get to review the greatest moment in Deep Space Nine history.
Well, we just did Star Trek 5. Now we're getting these out of the way, folks.
When I looked at that on the Amazon Prime list, I saw the next episode and went, ouch, I'm already hurting thinking about this one.
So, but actually, you want to listen to that because our pain is your enjoyment. That's for sure.
Yes, that is true.
So I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Star Trek, including Matthew W., Dan W., Jacob F., Sam W., and Thomas H. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give, and next time when we come around to Deep Space Nine again, you can enjoy our pain. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of The Passenger? And what did you think of Jimmy's alternate ending there? I kind of like it, but what do you think? let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek or our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing, actually, a Voyager episode. Voyager's next up.
Oh.
State of Flux is the next episode. Until then, Father Cory Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I just seem to have a talent, I suppose. A vision that sees past the obvious, around the mundane, right to the target. Fate has granted me a gift.
Okay.